Okay, a year ago, this company sent me a spin bike, and they were the first company to ever reach out to me to send me a product. And several companies have reached out to me, and I turned down most of them because I'm not interested in their products. But I really wanted a spin bike, so I got a spin bike from them last year. I think it was like a year ago. Um, and I ended up not using it very much because spin bikes are made to take classes. So the most famous spin bike is the Peloton, and then you take these classes. They're like spin classes, and I'm not super interested in the spin classes, so I ended up not using it very much. But they reached out to me this year and said that they had a new model that let you cast to the screen whatever you want. And that's mainly what I really wanted. And with the old one, you could do that, but it was very, like, there was a workaround. It was really kludgy and it didn't work very well. So I agreed to check out this new bike that has the thing. Now, it's not changed very much. The few things that changed is the screen is a little smaller, and that's good. The last one was 32 inches. That's excessively large. This is 24 inches, plenty big. Um, there's my EUC in the background. But otherwise, it stayed mostly the same. The thing that I had problems with the last bike in terms of build quality was the screws in the back did not engage very far, and it was pretty easy to strip out the screws if you torque them down too much. But these screws, they've been redesigned so that they engage a lot sooner, so there's less risk of stripping them out. They're pretty hefty. The whole bike is very smooth and quiet. It doesn't, you can hear it, very little noise, and it's built like a tank. This thing will last forever. If you wear out this bike, you'll have definitely become one of the most fit people on the planet if you wear out this bike. It's got lots of adjustments for height, for the seat. It comes with these little weights, and it has a magnetic resistance. So anyway, very standard spin bike. Nothing very unusual about it. It's very well built. I think for the price, it's a really good spin bike. If you're interested in these classes, you can get them through their app. I'm totally uninterested in the classes. So why did I want this spin bike?
Well, one of the goals of many runners is to qualify for the Boston Marathon. That's something I've never done before. And one of my goals this year is to try to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And so if here's the Boston Marathon page and you find your age group, here's my age group, and I have to run a marathon in under 3 hours and 20 minutes. That equates to be about a 7 minute 40-second mile for 26.2 miles. That's a full minute per mile faster than my previous fastest marathon time. Um, so I have a lot of work ahead of me, and I know that I have to train way harder than I did for my previous marathons. Previous marathons, I kind of never really trained seriously and just kind of ran recreationally and showed up for the race and ran the marathon. But this year, in order to accomplish this goal, if I have even a prayer of doing it, I need to do some serious training and have kind of a plan to do it. And that's what led me to this guy. This guy is Mark Allen. He is the six-time Ironman world champion. If you guys don't know what an Ironman race is, it is a 2.4 mile swim followed by a 112-mile bike ride followed by a full marathon. So it's quite an endeavor. He accomplishes that whole thing in about 8 hours. And in the early '90s, he dominated the whole field, and he's considered by many to be the GOAT of Ironman racing. And I think Sports Illustrated named him as the greatest endurance athlete of all time. Anyways, if you read his kind of personal story, he was in his 20s and running these races, and he was always coming in second place to another guy named Tim Scott, who's also an amazing athlete and won the Ironman multiple times as well. I think he won it 6 times as well, but not concurrently. Um, Anyways, he got burned out, and he just was never able to get on top of the podium. And he says right here, fortunately, right about then, I was introduced to Phil Maffetone and his philosophies on heart rate training. So who is this Phil Maffetone guy? So this is one of Phil Maffetone's papers. He's an exercise physiologist and a performance coach, and he came up with this concept of maximum aerobic function. And his training strategy is that you should go at a very low intensity. kind of a painfully low intensity. So he doesn't want people to go fast until they've maxed out their aerobic engine. So his method is, and this is kind of a rule of thumb, but his method is you take 180 and you subtract whatever your age is. So let's say you're 40 years old. Okay, let's say you're 50 years old. If you're 50 years old, your 180 minus 50 would give you a heart rate of 130. And so what you have to do is you have to do some kind of exercise, be it rowing, swimming, running, biking, whatever, that is around 130, but you're not supposed to exceed that heart rate. Now, 130 is a pretty low heart rate, and people that are runners, when they first start doing this, they realize they're running kind of painfully slow. So this, he wants you to do this for many hours a week. So, 5 to 7 hours a week at this low intensity, and just do nothing but that until you stop seeing gains before you start doing any speed work or anything else. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. And you have to find some way to spend a lot of time doing a low intensity exercise. And in fact, if you're doing cycling, instead of doing 140 minus your age, it's 140 minus your age, and then you minus it an additional 10 beats. So instead of 130, it's actually 120. They want you to go at 120 on a bicycle, because on a bicycle, it's kind of just lower body work and it doesn't stress your system as much. So you want to lower it a little bit more. Okay, so why does he want to do that? What they want to do is they want to maximize your aerobic capacity, which means your ability to use oxygen to generate energy. So let's look at some molecules that your body uses. And the two major molecules your body uses for fuel is fats, and this is an example of a fatty acid, and carbohydrates, and this is glucose. So carbohydrates are starches and sugars. Starches are basically chains of sugars, just chained together. Your body chops them up, and your body turns all the starches and sugars into glucose, and then it processes glucose. And then these fatty acids are usually come in the form of triglycerides, which is like the fats that you eat. And triglycerides are glycerol that's attached to 3 separate fatty acids. So here's one fatty acid, here's 3 of them. And you notice this one has like 2 bonds here. This is, if you've ever heard the term saturated and unsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids, this is what they're talking about. See, these carbons, so all the C's stand for carbon and the H stands for hydrogen and the O stands for oxygen. All the carbons are saturated with hydrogen. So each carbon is full of the hydrogen. In this case, there's a double bond here, and there's only one hydrogen attached to these 2 carbons. So these are unsaturated. They're not fully saturated with hydrogens. And if they're polyunsaturated, there's more than one of these bonds. And then you notice that when they put in those bonds, it kinks the molecule. It kinks the chain, so there's a little kink in it. So it doesn't lay as flat. So basically, it doesn't congeal. These fats don't tend to congeal. So if you see a fat that like congeals at room temperature, like lard or something like that, those are saturated fats like this. And like olive oil and stuff will have unsaturated fats. So that's why they stay liquid and things like that. Coconut oil is a saturated fat. So you'll see coconut oil turn solid because they're straight like this and the molecules line up very well. Okay, so anyways, your body, you can use carbohydrates and fats to produce energy. It can also use proteins. This is glycine and amino acid, which is a building block of protein. But generally, that goes through this long process called gluconeogenesis that we don't need to talk about. It's like kind of a energy source of last resort. Your body does not want to use protein for energy. Your body wants to use protein to build things, not to burn, to make fuel. Now, what's interesting is if you look at, these are called alkanes. These are part of gasoline. Gasoline is composed of many different molecules, and they're called hydrocarbons because they have hydrogens and carbons. And what's funny is that these are called carbohydrates. So carbohydrates is carbon and hydrogen, and then these are called hydrocarbons. So they're kind of the same thing. But if you look at the structure of this, you see it's a bunch of C's and a bunch of H's. It's very similar to the structure of this. except for this thing at the end, which is called the carboxyl group at the end here. So fatty acids and hydrocarbons are very, very similar. And when you burn this in your body, so this is glucose. So glucose has 6 hydrocarbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. So if you look back at this, you're gonna see, if you count these, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. And if you counted the oxygens, there'd be 6 of them. If you count the hydrogens, there's 12 of them. And then what it does is your body takes 1 molecule of glucose, combines it with 6 molecules of oxygen, and then it turns it into carbon dioxide and water. So the end product of your body generating energy with glucose is carbon dioxide and water. And in fact, if you perfectly burned hydrocarbons, that is your output. Your output will also be carbon dioxide and water. Now, because combustion in an engine is not perfect, you're going to get a lot of soot, which is partially burned hydrocarbons, and you're going to get carbon monoxide. That's when you're burning hydrocarbons and there's not quite enough oxygen, you'll get carbon monoxide instead of carbon dioxide. But anyways, this is how it works. And if you're interested, this is kind of the process by which your body burns the glucose. And it doesn't burn it like we do in an internal combustion engine. It burns it chemically in a stepwise process and releases the energy in the chemical bonds. And what it does is it first, and your body basically turns this into something called ATP. And ATP is what your body uses to move muscles, move nerves, that kind of stuff. So ATP is the energy currency of your body. So it wants to turn everything into ATP. What it does is it breaks down glucose into pyruvate, and it uses 2 ATPs to start the process, and it gets 4 ATPs out. So there's a net gain of 2 ATP when you break down glucose to pyruvate. Pyruvate then enters this, what's called the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. And as it goes through the citric acid, it makes a bunch of these things, NADH, 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 and then FADH right here. And this NADH and FADH goes into something called the electron transport chain. And basically it uses the energy in these molecules to pump protons into this space and build a proton gradient. And when the protons come back, it produces ATP through this thing. So it's a very unique and pretty cool process by which you're making ATP out of this thing. And then obviously it turns the NADH back into NAD, which then cycles back into here and into here. So this it makes 2 NADHs here as well. Now, what happens is this process right here happens without the presence of oxygen. You do not need oxygen for this to happen. But for this to happen, you need oxygen because you'll see right here, it uses oxygen right here. It uses oxygen and combines it with the protons to turn it into water. So it turns the oxygen, the oxygen receives the electrons at the end of the electron transport chain and turns it into water. And without oxygen, this whole process does not work. And this is the process by which you generate most of your energy. And this is something called oxidative phosphorylation. Now, what happens in your body is if you don't have oxygen, it gets stuck here and it runs out of this NAD. And so in order to make NAD so you can continue this process, so this electron transport chain happens in the mitochondria. This is where all that happens. And so when you don't have enough oxygen, you run out of this thing. So to make more of this NAD, what it does is it reduces pyruvate and uses that to create NAD from this NADH. So basically this becomes NADH and then it turns it back into that so it can cycle back and you can break down more glucose. But if you do this system, you end up generating a bunch of lactate. And lactate builds up in your muscles and in your bloodstream, and eventually you won't be able to function if you build up too much lactate. Your body stops working. And that's what endurance athletes call their lactate threshold. That's the level of exertion at which you cannot clear lactate as fast as you generate it. And so at very low levels of activity, you're gonna make enough oxygen you're gonna be able to process enough oxygen not to generate too much lactate. But as you exercise more and more intensely, you can't process oxygen fast enough to prevent lactic acid buildup. So the whole process of this maffetone method is to try to get your body really good at processing oxygen by making more mitochondria and make your mitochondria more efficient, so that you can do this electron transport chain much more efficiently and use oxygen a lot faster and better. And if you want to, so at low activity, your body can use something called beta oxidation. And what it does is, okay, so look at this. This is a fatty acid. So this is a fatty acid. It's reversed. So you see the carboxyl group is on this side. The carboxyl group's on this, and this is a big chain of carbon. And what it does is it uses water to break this down and knock off the carboxyl group and turn it into acetyl-CoA. So basically, it inserts water here and it chops 2 carbons off at a time. So it chops it here, then it chops it here, then it chops it here, chops it here, and leaves a new carboxyl group at the end. And so basically, it chops this down one by one, and then the acetyl-CoA can go into this TCA cycle and go down this electron transport chain and make you ATP. And so this is a much better system for endurance athletes, because your body only has a certain amount of glucose and glycogen stored in your liver and your muscles. That will run out pretty fast. People say it runs out usually at around mile 16 or 18 of a marathon. And at that point, if you run out of this, you undergo something that people call bonking, which is where you feel terrible and you have no energy. That's because you ran out of this stuff. So what they want to do is you want to improve your aerobic threshold so that you can process most of your energy through this beta oxidation of fats, because everyone has enough fat in their body to theoretically run hundreds of miles. You have enough stored in your body in fat. Even a thin person has enough stored to run hundreds of miles. So you will not run out of fat as a fuel during a marathon or even an ultra marathon. So this whole idea is to try to get this done. So back to the bicycle. If you want to spend a lot of time, sometimes the weather is bad. So you want to get on a bike, but being on a bike doing low intensity exercise is pretty boring. So it'd be nice to watch something you're interested in. And so that's what this bike is good for.
Okay, so what's different about this bike is back here. The old screen did not have any of these ports. It had just these 2 ports down here. And this one has 2 USB ports. It has an HDMI port and it has an Ethernet port for some reason. I'm not sure why you'd want the Ethernet port. It does hook up to Wi-Fi. It's got Wi-Fi built in. But anyway, there's 2 options with this HDMI port. If you want to stream wirelessly, you can get a Chromecast. So you can get a Chromecast and stick that in. That's what I was doing for a while. But eventually they sent me this USB-C to HDMI cable. And then you can hook that up directly to your phone. And then it'll just mirror whatever your phone does. So you just plug in the USB-C into your phone. Now they also have a cable for iPhone users. It uses the iPhone connector and has HDMI on the other side. But then, you just click here and then it shows up here. And then while it'll tell you your RPMs, your power output, your resistance, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, here's the video from a year ago. Now, I was hoping that this thing would do wireless casting, but it does not do that. I tried to make it work for a while. There is the workaround way of doing the wireless casting, but that is it's not great. So it doesn't have wireless casting. And the other thing I was hoping for is that it would hook up to your phone wirelessly so that you could use it for Rouvy or Zwift. I tried to make that work, and that does not work on this bike. There is a workaround for that too, but it's not great. You have to use this third-party app to do that application. But this cable and casting movies or TV shows that are on your phone, or streaming Netflix or Amazon Prime or YouTube or anything while you're on the phone, that works great. And so this is, I think, significantly a better bike than the one I had before. Mainly for my purposes, I'm not too interested in the spin classes. For spin classes, the other bike was fine. For the purposes that I want of doing kind of a low intensity, long aerobic exercise while watching something I'm interested in, this is perfect. It's very easy to use. You just plug in your phone and it just mirrors it, and it works great. So if you guys are interested, the link to buy the thing is in the description below. Otherwise, I hope the rest of the video was somewhat interesting for you. Thanks for watching, guys.